Hi, Rabia. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to For Your Information, it's first
Thank
official
you for having me.
podcast. And today we're going to be discussing sports in Pakistan. But before we do that, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, like you said, my name is Rabia Ahmed, and currently working in sports in Pakistan. I'm working with a sports agency by the name of Magnus Sports. So my career basically started off in sports in 2016, but before that, I have been working as a lawyer. I
Okay.
graduated from law school in 2012,
Nice. Cool.
and I was a I was always passionate about sports. I played all sorts of sports growing up, and
Sure.
like from cricket to basketball, even
Mm-hmm.
did a bit of archery also.
Okay.
So I've like played a little bit of different kind of sports. And after graduating from law school, I started working with a law firm, and very quickly I realized that it's not really for me. Um,
Yeah.
so after that, I started looking for different kind of work. I started volunteering as a photographer at sports events. That
Okay.
was basically my
That was
time
your in.
away from. Yeah, that was my in and my time away from the regular work and everything that I
All
was
right.
doing. So when I was taking photographs and everything, I started interacting with a lot of different sports people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started listening to their stories and their struggles and everything, and it sort of dawned on me at that point in time that these guys don't have any representatives.
Yeah.
And that's when I started thinking towards there needs to be some sort of representation and all of that. So obviously it took me a couple of years to finally say that okay, I'm making a career change and I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
this full time. So in 2016 I made the plunge, and here I am today.
All right, that's pretty cool. Yeah, so talking about recognition, one thing I want to touch on is you recently got recognized in the Muslim Women in Sports Network. There
Yeah,
was an
yeah,
article
I
up
did.
on you. So, considering the fact that you shifted gears almost from law to sports, and I know for a fact that you didn't leave law completely behind, you went into sports
Yeah.
law and you found a way to imply the skills and the knowledge you had earned before into this.
Yeah.
Did that feel good? Did you feel like you were doing something right when that happened?
To be very honest, I still haven't really. It still hasn't hit me yet.
All
It's. I
right.
mean, it's just like okay, yeah, there's an article out there, but for me, I still feel like there's a long way for me to go, and
Yeah.
uh, and that. I mean, it sort of. It was nice that oh my god, but it still
Hmm.
really hasn't hit me as mostly. I probably in a week or so I'll be like, oh, my name was actually in the list for in like
Yeah.
in a global list. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, it was a really proud moment for all of us because we were like, "Oh God, that's actually really cool that this happened." Because we often talk about um, people in sports, whether it be behind the scenes, coaches, people
yeah,
working in marketing or anything. We don't get recognition, which is a pretty good segue into what we really wanted to talk about, which is the decline of the sports industry in Pakistan, which is
hmm,
the proposed topic of the podcast.
yeah.
Um, so again, before we talk about the eventual decline, let's a sort of set a picture of what the current climate is. So could you just give us a little bit of detail about that?
Yeah, I mean, in this year, obviously we've had COVID, so nothing much is going on. So
Mm-hmm.
really, sports-wise, we're at a standstill. There's no events. There's nothing going on. But
Yeah.
before COVID, we were not doing that well anyway.
Yeah.
So in the past couple of years, we've had a lot of issues with athletes qualifying for major events,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had a lot of issues with sponsorships. We've had issues with publicity of the sport.
Yeah.
We're really like a cricket obsessed nation, and we're really not putting any focus on other sports.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and I
true.
think it stems down from how these other sports are governed, right?
Mm-hmm.
These other sports don't have the legislations, they don't have the regulations or the infrastructures
Yeah.
to basically promote the sport. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have PCB, right?
Yeah. Yep.
PCB is actually doing some work to promote the sport.
Mm-hmm.
They're going after sponsors and they have the professionals to deal with those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
But when you go for something like the Karate Federation, the Tennis Federation, or
Yeah.
anything, any of those kind of federations, you don't meet anybody who knows the sport. A,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they don't know how to govern the sport. They
Yeah.
don't know how to market the sport. So
Mm-hmm.
eventually, all the athletes suffer.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing my research on this, one of the things which really stuck out was the fact that all these federations, because there is a federation for everything. There's a hockey
Yeah,
federation. There's a there's everything. There's a sports board. There's an Olympic association. But one thing which was really hinted on was the fact that the people running, the people in quote unquote power,
yeah,
um, don't have anything to do with the sports. They're either politicians or there's some sort of bureaucracy involved, and
yeah.
that due which or that passion which a sports person would bring, that doesn't really come out. And but I just wanted to ask you, the could this be a result of the fact that we're a very cricket obsessed nation, like, or do you think it's more of a causation thing that because these things aren't getting their due, that's why there's
See,
no.
I think each sport can have its own place. Like
Mm-hmm.
any other country, you have the UK, you have the US.
Yeah.
All sports, promoted side by side. If these federations had the capacity to basically promote the sport better,
Mm-hmm.
plus, uh, if the athlete performs well, obviously the news agencies and the media, they're going to cover that story, right? This
Yeah.
needs to be like on a constant basis. So had that not happened, had that decline not happened, that the media stopped taking interest, and
Mm-hmm.
the federations and the athletes stopped, like, didn't perform too well because of the federations, I think we could have really done something really well had all of these things been in a good state overall from the start.
Yeah. So it's pretty much a side by side thing. Everything kind of crumpled all together at the same time.
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Cool. So
One thing I do think about, though. I mean, I'm
mhm.
sorry I'm cutting you off,
No, no,
but
that's fine. That's fine.
uh, you look at hockey.
Yeah.
We have World Cups, we have Olympic medals, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
the last World Cup we won was in 1994,
Yeah.
and the
That's
Cricket
yeah.
World
That's pretty
Cup
much
was
the
in
last.
1992. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, what I personally fail to understand, and I hope, I mean, there's somebody out there who understands this well, is we won the Cricket World Cup. That's amazing. We
Mm-hmm.
won the Hockey World Cup, and since then we've just seen the decline of hockey and no interest in the sport overall.
Okay,
Um,
so
yeah,
when I was a little bit younger, I mean, I'm
yeah,
not that old anyways, but I used to tell people used to ask me why I'm not interested in cricket, and I used to have this theory that every generation has its own sport.
yeah,
Specifically in Pakistan, like my dada and my nana
hmm,
grandfathers were obsessed with hockey. They were equally obsessed with cricket, particularly because hockey wasn't at that level anymore. Early 2000s, it wasn't being televised. The local clubs, Lahore, Karachi. My first sports experience was I went to watch, I think, game Lahore versus Karachi with my dada. So that was my
yeah,
first kind of live event. But yeah, I used to have this thing that no, it's a generational thing. Now there's going to be a switch from cricket to football because
yeah,
me and all my peers were obsessed with football. We didn't have that liking towards cricket, but Pakistan India ka match dekhna hai, wo ho gaya,
yeah,
we're done now, let's get back to football.
yeah,
uh, but that hasn't really affected the trajectory of cricket, because that's one thing I've noticed, that football, even though there are very, very talented people out there, we used to, when I was in seventh grade, I used to play against boys from Liari, and a 6 year old boy he had amazing talent.
hmm.
And that shift didn't happen. Um, would you contribute that to the lack of infrastructure as
Yeah.
well?
I think that's one of the elements. I think that's definitely one of the elements. I mean, right now we don't have the infrastructure for sports that, even for cricket. I mean, we do have quite a few stadiums, but they're not all that amazing.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
if you look at, then if you compare that to other sports,
yeah,
you can't even say those places where these guys train, uh, these athletes where they're trained, they're not
they're not
they're
adequate
not
at
good at,
all.
yeah, at all.
Yeah. I guess one of the trends you're going to start seeing, which we are seeing right now, is people who can somewhat afford to get into these private institutions and private clubs to
Yeah.
to train. They're sort of the people who are taking sports forward because
I would have to actually disagree with you on that.
all right, cool.
Because, I mean, you look at athletes like Sadia Abbas,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Uh, I went and saw and I visited the place where he trained.
Mm-hmm.
That place was hot. That
Mm-hmm.
place was sort of really falling apart. The ceiling was falling apart. There was water dripping down.
Uh-huh.
So these guys really, they have the passion for sports.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they keep pursuing it and they keep striving to become the best. Is because they actually take this sort of as a career because they don't want to do anything else. And I think that's where, even if you look at cricket, most of the cricket players that have come out are not from privileged backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So I feel like apart from maybe tennis, most of the athletes are not from
From
very privileged backgrounds.
Acha, the reason I was thinking along those lines was because of the fact that those training facilities aren't really there, and another factor which comes into play is naturally money. These people who are representing us on an international or any sort of level, they're not really represented by the government. They're not compensated by the government,
Hmm.
and so in my head, a person who is really passionate about sports, but they might have to put that aside because they know that it's not a viable career.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it's
those,
exactly like that.
yeah, so those societal things and the fact that the government isn't really giving their dues, and previously in doing the research, these private companies, Sui Gas, HBL, they would contribute to that, but
Yeah.
that's stopped as well, and I think that's also led to the eventual demise.
Yes, of course. I mean, if you compare us to India, for instance,
Hmm.
and how they've grown their sports,
Yeah.
uh, it's amazing. I mean, we're similar in the way that we're crazy about cricket, but they've
Hmm.
taken on other sports and they've grown those sports in a very, very smart way. And in the
Yeah, I
past couple
mean,
of years, you've
I,
seen kabaddi leagues and you've
yeah,
seen the
exactly.
football.
Yeah. Yeah, Kabaddi League is a big one because Kabaddi is not a particularly it's wrestling everywhere else, and Kabaddi
Yeah.
is somewhat a regional sport in South Asia, but they've taken it and they've made it to an insane level where their Kabaddi League is harboring a lot of superstars in their own right, and they've done the same with football as well.
And apparently, they have a very nice tennis league as well.
All right,
I'm
okay.
not too familiar with it, but they're
Mm-hmm.
doing pretty well with the tennis league also. So, I mean, we need companies and we need sponsors. But when we say that we need sponsors on board, then we also have to again go back to the same thing. Is the federation that is hosting an event, for instance, or looking for sponsorship, doing enough for sponsors to be interested in sponsoring that athlete?
Huh, I mean, there's a give
And
and take, right? Like, no sponsor
exactly,
would come on board if there are only two eyes on a particular event.
exactly. I'll give you an example. Um, Back in 2018, I suppose, early 2018, I was working with the Pakistan Davis Cup team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were looking at sponsors, and I think it was either 2017, 18. I'm sorry, I can't remember the year.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking to a sponsor, and the sponsor said that I wanted to be televised, and that's when
Okay.
I'm going to give you my money. The sponsor did give some money,
Mm-hmm.
but the issue was when the tennis player got on, they stopped televising.
Oh, okay.
So you can imagine the
Uh,
sponsor being pretty mad about it.
yeah, I'm sure you were pretty mad about it as well.
I was pretty mad about it, obviously. But the sponsor, I mean, obviously, the sponsor was like, "You guys promised it," and PTV did promise it.
Yeah.
But then again, probably something better came along, and they
Uh,
they switched it from Pakistan Davis Cup to to uh, to something else.
yeah, that's also the lack of faith and a lack of, I think, goodwill is also a pretty big issue in general in everything in Pakistan. Is somebody promises you something, but you can't be sure that they would deliver on that. So it
Yeah.
completely works that. But the media is also a pretty big, as you said earlier, a pretty big reason why there's this decline. Because currently, like, when Magnus sports kind of became a thing,
Mm.
and I started seeing like these, like Sadia Basi and all these athletes which were really, really excelling in their sport and taking Pakistan's name on a very, on a level which we haven't really recognized since 1994 or 1992, right?
Mm.
But the media has no knowledge of it, or if they have the knowledge of it, they're choosing to discarded. Like, I recently read that in 2019, Special Olympics got Pakistani Special Olympics. They got 61 medals, out of which
Mm.
18 were gold. And
Yeah.
the only way I actually found out about the Special Olympics was because they came to my A-level school, because it's a privately run body, and they were doing rounds of schools to kind of build up their their traction so that people would
Mm.
know and donate and do whatever. So the real question is, how do we change the media? Because until the media kind of sort of starts giving these the due where it's Sadi or it's anybody else, it won't
Yeah.
change.
It won't, definitely. I mean, journalists need to take more interest, to be very honest. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, I feel 98% of the journalists that we have in Pakistan right now who are covering sports are not sports journalists, they're cricket journalists.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry,
for
I'm going to
sure.
get a lot of backlash for this
No.
if somebody hears this, but that's the truth. They don't know much about any other sports except
Mm-hmm.
maybe two or three other two or three journalists.
Huh.
Most of them don't know much about sports
Yeah.
apart from cricket. So they can call themselves cricket journalists, but we need people who are covering stories of athletes. We have journalists like Faizan Lakhani, Natasha Rahil, Umaid Wasim. These guys
Mm-hmm.
are covering stories outside of cricket as well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Faizan does cricket, but these guys are doing stories outside of cricket. So we need more people to show interest. Maybe
Yeah.
people like you and me. I mean, we can contribute and we can write articles about it also.
Yeah, I
But
mean, even on
overall,
social media, if we just put up a post, that would
yeah,
probably get some sort of traction.
definitely. And sometimes people, I mean, I've noticed this on Twitter. Sometimes you post something, sometimes it really goes viral.
Mm-hmm.
Like something that most journalists wouldn't really even consider a good story would go viral on social media.
Yeah, like a couple of years ago, there was this big outcry about sports in Pakistan over
Mm.
the Olympic cyclist who was driving a rickshaw.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
that,
was.
I mean, then again, I'm sorry, but I keep going back to the federations as well. And then all of the whole thing sort of repeats
It's
itself.
it's just a loop essentially.
Exactly. So if you're going round and round in circles where it's the athlete who's not getting recognized,
Mm-hmm.
the athlete's not getting sponsors, the athlete's not earning any money, and when the athlete gets old and
Yeah,
retires, they don't
they
have
have
any
nothing to
money, and
show
they,
for.
yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to end up doing something that's like that, and that guy ended up driving a rickshaw.
Mm-hmm. So I think we've pretty much touched on what's wrong.
Yeah.
Actually, one another thing which keeps popping up is the fact that naturally there's no input from the federations, but that also then results in us not keeping up with the times, keeping up with what the standard of international sports is. Like, one of the big things
Yeah.
was that currently the Pakistani hockey team is not practicing on the same rules as what's being played internationally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any, like, is that across the board, or is there any situation where there's some sort of place apart from cricket? Obviously, cricket is holy grail, we can't say anything to that.
We are, I, we, okay. Other countries are light years ahead of us.
Yeah,
Let's just put it that way.
yeah,
Instead
for
of saying
sure.
we are really bad at this, but in the other countries are, that's probably the only positive spin I can say. Other countries are better, we're not bad. But the thing is that it's across the board, from karate to squash to name the sport, and you won't find anybody who's qualified. Like for instance, coaches, they're not qualified
Hmm.
enough to be training these athletes who aspire to go to the Olympics.
Yeah.
We don't have the technology, we don't have the sports tech to
Mm-hmm.
monitor their performances. So those are two really major things that really affect performances. Yeah, athlete recovery is, I think, very important, and a lot of
Yeah.
people don't even know that there's something known as
There's
recovery
no,
after,
yeah.
yeah. So
I think there's also a reliance on pure talent. और बंदे के पास talent है, कुछ ना कुछ तो कर लेगा, which is really not the case unless you actually put in the time. Or if they
exactly, I
have the
mean,
infrastructure to put in the time, they're probably gonna excel much further.
yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, it's just the fact that talent can take you so far. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you have, let's say, somebody like Esamul Haq Qureshi, right?
Haji. Yeah.
He is talented, and
Mm-hmm.
he really works his butt off.
Yeah.
He really, really works a lot, and he spent money because he could at that point in time. I mean, it was difficult for him, yes, but he went out of Pakistan. He got coaching outside of Pakistan, and say now you see where he is, right? It's
Yeah.
talent plus all of the other things combined.
Yeah.
On the
Exactly.
flip side, you take somebody like Akil Khan, who's super talented, right? He is Pakistan's number one. He was Pakistan's number one for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But that guy wasn't able to go play abroad. He wasn't able to go get that kind of training. He wasn't able to do too much outside of Pakistan. So
Right.
if we, if had Akil gotten the kind of training and the sponsorships that he required back in, let's say, 1998, 2000,
Mm-hmm.
the story would have been much different. It would have been Akil and Assam, not just Assam.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Acha, what about grassroots level sports? So when you're really young, like if you look at America, for example, every kid
Yeah,
is in some sort of sports league. They have, and it starts from when they're like 2, and you
yeah,
put them in, and that goes. And when I was in school, we used to go for football, and school games period used to be fun. But other than that, there was no legitimacy when it comes to someone wanting to play sports. Like if someone said that, oh, I really want to focus on football, that's my primary goal. I
yeah.
don't think there's any sort of especially in the early years, there's no sort of I keep using the word infrastructure, but plan or any sort of thing from even the schools or anything to
No, we
kind
don't.
of push the guy forward. So
We don't. So if you, and this is one of the things that I keep saying as well, that we need to have a policy that says that sports is mandatory
mhm,
for everyone from a very young age, in government schools, in private schools, both.
yeah.
I'm from Islamabad, and
Hmm.
most of the schools here are in houses. These
Hmm.
houses are not big enough to have a stadium, or to have a football pitch, or
Yeah,
a,
for
a
sure.
basketball court even, for sure.
Yeah.
So if you don't have those kind of facilities, uh, kids are not going to be interested in sports, and even if they're interested in sports, there's not too much that they can do.
Hmm.
From the government side, we don't have any programs or plans where kids can go and learn sports,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
we do have those little football academies, let's say.
Yeah.
They're popping up everywhere, where you have 2 to 4 a group, and then you have 4 to 6, and under 8s and under 10s and
Huh,
under
like
12s.
in Karachi, there was like Zamzama United and Karachi United, and there were, I'm not stressing this enough, there were like about 20 more.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the fact that I'm not part of that circle anymore, but now when I hear about it, it's pretty much Zamzama United, and there are only 2 left.
Yeah, see, the thing is, if you're running a club, then you need money to run the club.
Yeah.
And I mean, kids in private schools can afford to go to those
Mm-hmm.
clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Kids in government schools cannot.
Yeah, for sure.
So
And
that's the thing, and that's why we can't. We don't have those programs. So the majority of the population, majority of the kids get left out.
yeah, and we're kind of just completely not talking about the people who aren't going to any school.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's a very sizable amount of people, about amount of kids who don't go to school. Like again, when we used to play against these kids from Liari, a bus used to come in, and their coach used to coach us as well. Now we
Mm-hmm.
used to play on a plot. We had access to a stadium as well. Every Saturday we used to go there, and we used to have matches amongst each other. And but these guys used to come on a coaster all the way from Lyari just to have the opportunity to play with somebody else. And
Yeah.
the coach really like drilled this into our heads, because he was talking about how they don't do anything else. They wake up, they go to a plot or any sort of area which is empty, and they just play football until 8 o'clock, and that's when they come back,
And
or
their
they get
skill
out.
is next level.
Oh, yeah, it's totally next level. I think I've told you the story about this kid called
Yeah.
Commando. I
Yeah.
I will never forget that we were being coached by A-level students, and this kid was 7. And his skill and his power of the shot, like when he took a shot, I was in awe, because it was faster than anything I had ever seen before.
Hmm.
Because our coaches didn't hit like that,
Yeah.
and he
I
was
mean,
6.
that's what happens when you're training like 8 or 10 hours a day. And this is not training. This is just playing.
Playing. Yeah, yeah.
So
It's
imagine
it's
if these kids get trained properly, the
yeah.
potential that they have.
It's also about another issue which people were really touching on. I read like 4 or 5 articles, and they all touched on one thing, which is the lack of polish, or the lack of kind of we can train our cricketers in playing, but we also need to change them in professionalism and how to behave on and
Yeah.
off the pitch.
Yep.
And I think, I don't know what the situation is. जाहिर सी बात है, अगर initial training ही नहीं हो रही, तो grooming तो बहुत बात की बात होती है,
Because
right? But is there some sort of situation where we might not be um, we might not give credit to these people because we think they can't be groomed?
I think everybody can be groomed. Every single person on earth can be groomed, right?
Yeah, like that's exactly what I was thinking,
Yeah.
that if you pick these people, like go to them, and even in situations where they are playing from, they're playing from 8 to 8, and give some sort of structure. Be a government nahi kar rahi thi, so this guy who used to coach them, he used to coach us, he used to coach them for free, and kind of give them a space to kind of let their anger out and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And if you just go to them and have some sort of institution in place, that grooming could probably
It's
get
essential,
there.
and especially when you start playing for Pakistan, even if you're not playing at the World Cup or any of those events, but even at smaller events, you're representing your country, right?
Mm-hmm.
So grooming definitely matters in that regard. Also, you're going outside Pakistan, you need to behave in a certain way, you need to speak in a certain way
Yeah,
also, and you need to represent your country in a certain way as well. So I think each federation, I don't know if there's any federation particularly doing that. I'm not aware of any, but if
I
there's
don't think
somebody
there
who's
is.
doing it, then that's fantastic. But the need for that is essential, as well as the need for athletes having access to social media.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah, that's
cannot
true.
stress that enough. Having worked with athletes for a very long time, I've noticed that quite a few don't like using social media,
Uh-huh.
or they think it's a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them have private profiles, some of them don't have any profiles.
Uh-huh.
And that's essential. Um, but then again, there's communication skill that comes in that regard also.
Yeah,
So they're
yeah.
learning. Some of the athletes are learning with time
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to manage their own social media. And when they have a good following on social media, then obviously sponsors come on board also.
Yeah, for sure. Like Sadi is a very good example.
Yeah,
I logged, like I just opened Toyota randomly, Toyota
yeah,
Indus, and I was like, wait, I know that guy. Oh, that's
yeah,
Sadi. He's in his pose. He's like, and it's a good feeling when you see someone being recognized.
yeah.
And I think Sadi is doing a really good job in that. Like he's the last time I met him was a really long time ago, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. But every
Mhm.
time every time I've spoken to him, he's always trying to set up some sort of tournament to
Yep,
to highlight the talent there. So he's kind of filling these two roles of, he's an athlete as well, but at the same time he's doing these sort of coaching, mentoring programs where he's trying to groom other athletes to maybe eventually take his place, or he's trying to set up a system where
yep.
there's some sort of representation and credibility in karate.
Yeah, and he wants this to
especially.
be a very long-term thing. So he has a plan set out for after he retires as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you can see this guy who's been struggling to compete for so long and struggling to represent, struggling to get money, all of those things, but he
Yeah,
still thinks that he's going to do this after he retires. He's not going to go and do some normal
some
job,
other,
right? He's go he's going to go and he's going to train the future of Pakistan.
yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of conviction to do that, especially like
Definitely.
if you've been competing and you're not getting your dues at all. uh to have that mentality, it takes a big step.
And it's frustrating, to be honest. I mean, if these athletes really sometimes I'm in awe of them because they're
Mm-hmm.
just doing this day after day after day. And sometimes I myself, and I said this to a lot of people so many times, that sometimes I, as somebody who's working behind the scenes,
uh
I'm like, why am I doing this? So imagine that these guys who
These,
are
yeah,
actually
on the
competing,
front lines,
they
yeah.
how yeah, it's just crazy.
Acha, another thing which I wanted to talk to you about, which is is probably going to be a big rant, is
Okay,
just if you could slightly touch on
I've
the
been
fact.
ranting, haven't I?
No, it's perfectly fine, but slightly touch on the fact that women in particular are not given their dues. Like another example, when we take cricket for example, women,
Mhm.
our women's team has been winning more than the men's team in at least recent years, and nobody
Mhm.
really talks about that because nobody really thinks it might be a credible thing, or or
Yeah,
televised thing. I
yeah,
think it should be televised. At least we'll have something to cheer on. Okay, okay, these guys have been winning, let's cheer them on.
yeah,
It's obviously there's the systemic um sexism which is in our country, but
yeah,
would there be a situation where there could be steps taken? Again, we've been talking about journalists and all that,
yeah.
but just highlight a couple of things which why this is such a problem.
So I think this is a very global thing. It's not
Hmm.
limited to our country.
Yeah,
Every
for sure.
single team, every single women's sport across the world is facing this.
Yeah, we were talking
You can
about FIFA, where the
exactly.
women
So
are playing on turf and the men are not.
yeah. So I mean, you take that for an example. You take like Au- Australia is really doing something about it in
Hmm.
relation to women's football, right? But
Hmm. Yeah.
now that they've also won the bid to host the World Cup in 2023, Australia and New Zealand, they're really, this is really going to help them
Yeah, for sure.
grow the women's sport. So uh, I really don't even know where to start, to be honest.
Just
Uh,
let it all go. Let it all go.
there's so many things that can be said, but I think it's a very global thing, and
Uh-huh.
federations and everybody else needs to realize that women in sports can play a major role in representing your country and in winning medals for your country.
Hmm.
Sports is not just for men,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
equally for women as well, right?
Yeah,
You look at the US women's football team
exactly.
and
Yeah.
how they've performed since they won the first, well, was I don't think it was called the World Cup at that point in time, but in 1992 they sort of the first World Cup of, as we know it now.
Hmm.
They won the first one, and then for a very long time they didn't win anything. And then in 1999, when they won the World Cup, it really sort of changed how football was perceived over
Hmm.
there for women's
Hmm.
football. Although, I mean, they still think football is more of a women's sport as compared to a men's sport.
Yeah,
But
there's been an uplift in men also coming into football because of that. I think like
yeah, yeah,
MLS didn't
definitely.
exist a while ago, and now it's a very prominent part of the sports industry. It's a lot of people watch it now,
Yeah,
and that probably couldn't have happened without the women's team. But again, they're not given that you know credit where
the
you
credit
actually
where it's
changed
due. Yeah, yeah.
football. Exactly.
And the same thing is happening in Australia, and I think the same thing is also happening in Netherlands, where the
Hmm.
Netherlands women's team won the 2017's Euro, and
Okay.
then they were in the final of the World Cup last year.
Hmm.
So they are really working hard to change the landscape of football, at least in their countries. Uh, then it goes back again to the same argument that money needs to be spent.
Uh-huh.
for on athletes to grow the sports. So these girls, these women can go outside of Pakistan, represent the country,
Mm-hmm.
and win some medals. Money needs to be put. Like I told you the other day, when in 2014, when this half women's championship was happening,
Mm-hmm.
the ball boys were getting more money than the women
Yeah, yeah. You
women in the
mentioned that.
national team. So I mean, you can imagine the disparity of
Yeah, yeah.
it's not, you can't even call it disparity, to be
It's not
very
even
honest. I don't even know what it
disparity.
is.
It's weird. That's what it is. In Pakistan, in particular, when we're
Yeah,
talking about these federations,
yeah,
first question is, in terms of women in sports,
yeah.
is there a separate federation? And if there isn't, would it help to have a completely separate federation taking the women forward?
No, we don't have a separate federation, but
Mm-hmm.
I think more women need to be in places, higher positions here in the same federations. I don't think we need to
Uh-huh.
have a separate one. So
ठीक है.
let's say if this is a football federation, we need more women in the boardroom. We need more
Mm-hmm.
women in higher authority areas where they can actually make decisions. And I think that goes for all sports. Uh,
Yeah.
when and yes, more importantly, it's not just about having women in those positions. It's about having women who know what to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
and have experience, or have, even if they don't have experience, have the understanding of what needs to be done
Mm-hmm.
to grow sports for women across the nation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Let's talk
Yeah.
about sports law because that's something both you and I have
Yeah.
studied. I have studied it
Okay.
on a very, very minute scale because it
Yeah.
was really easy to get marks. I'm going to be very honest. But last time we spoke, I remember us talking about why you wouldn't, why nobody studies sports law, because much like medical negligence, and there are a lot of laws in Pakistan which don't really have a space. Tort law, which is one
Yeah.
of the most, it's one of the cornerstones of law in the world, वो
Hmm.
उसका यहाँ पे कोई है कुछ है ही नहीं, like there's no
कुछ नहीं है.
concept of it.
Yeah.
So you did a course on this, and I know that because I sent you the book. And why did you pick that up, knowing that that might not be implied in Pakistan on a regular scale?
Right. So I was part of a mentorship program with Law and Sports UK.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first cohort, and it was a 1 year long program where they have two mentees attached with one mentor.
Okay.
So my mentor was somebody who was working at a very high level in Switzerland as
Mm-hmm.
a lawyer. And then
Mm-hmm.
she eventually moved back to London. She was a UK based lawyer. So she was in Switzerland for a very long time. And then she
Okay.
moved back to the UK,
Mm-hmm.
where she has her own football, where she has her own
Practice.
sports practice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So sh- when I started the course, the idea behind this was to understand what the best practices are outside of Pakistan,
Okay.
to understand how things are being done internationally, what are the things that we need to focus on to grow,
Mm-hmm.
and what are the new things that we need to focus on that we can implement within our country, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
sports law isn't just like, just as you know, it's just not a law that's like very secluded in that it's sports ka apna koi law hai.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, you have competition laws applied to, you know, scenarios in sports, so there's a different way to look at those. And then you have
Yeah. Yeah.
then you have something that's completely different, that's the court of arbitration and for
Mm-hmm.
sports and that side of things. So my idea for enrolling or for applying in that course was to learn as much as I possibly can about how it works internationally,
Okay.
what lawyers are doing over there. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
we can bring that to
We
Pakistan,
can replicate
if
it.
not right now, but eventually.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so on a final note,
Yeah.
being the vice president of Magnus Sports,
Oh, it still sounds funny to me, vice president.
yeah. So, do you think that 2020 has kind of been a slump because of COVID?
Yes.
But do you think there was a do you think there would have been a positive change from 2019 to 2020 and 2020 to 2021, considering social media is a thing which can be tapped into, and Magnus Sports is doing a lot of work in that
Yeah.
regard. It's
Yeah.
highlighting their own talent. It's highlighting it, not just its own talent. It's highlighting every prominent thing
Yeah.
happening from Pakistan, whoever's getting a medal.
Yeah.
So do you think there's some sort of upward shift, or is it supposed to just be a flat line for a couple of years and then a boom is supposed to come?
Okay, so when I joined Magnus in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
this is something that we had a conversation about, me and my boss, uh, who you know very well.
Yeah,
So
I mean, whoever's gonna listen to this would probably not. So let me just explain. Uh, Magnus Sports, the boss is my uncle. Shout out Ashraf Karim. Thank you so much.
yeah, so when I joined Magnus, that was something we talked about a lot because we at that time felt that there's going to be a boom coming,
Mm-hmm.
maybe right after the Olympics.
Acha.
If we were able to get some athletes to the Olympics, it would sort of get better from there.
It didn't
And
happen though, na? I don't think
the Olympics,
anybody.
yeah, the Olympics didn't happen. They
Uh,
got pushed to next year, right?
uh-huh.
So now we're hoping that maybe after next Olympics, things are going to pick up, but
Mm-hmm.
not at the pace they would have been going had COVID not happened.
Okay.
So we, in the past couple of years, have had overall Pakistan has had athletes who are performing better than previous years, and
Mm-hmm.
these athletes could go on to play for another 8 years, right?
Yeah.
You have you have people like Talha Talib and Noor Bhatt who are weightlifters who
Mm-hmm.
can go on to compete for the next 12 years even.
Mm-hmm.
So you now you have a crop of athletes who are consistently doing well. What we thought we could do was get them international exposure, elevate their games,
Mm-hmm.
and that would in turn elevate the level of sports being played in Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
and more interest would develop by sponsors in sports.
Okay.
So we really had this idea that this is going to happen, but right now I think it's just for now. I mean, for the next 2 years, I suppose 2021, maybe after 2021 things will pick up,
Okay.
but I'm not so sure.
Acha. So, but agar COVID nahi hota, so you were expecting a little bit of an upshift.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely, for sure.
Okay. Awesome. So, is there anything else you would like to add or speak about which we haven't
Not
touched
in
on?
particular. I think we've touched on a lot of negatives. I would like to say there's a lot of positive that's happening
I
in
was
Pakistan. I
I was
mean,
just getting to that. Uh, we've
yeah.
just been complaining. Let's talk about something positive.
So I feel that we've talked, and I hate doing this, but I think I've been ranting quite a lot about the negatives of sports
Mm-hmm.
in sports in Pakistan. We have to give credit where credit is due. People are now taking interest uh, because of social media. A lot of people have started taking interest.
Yeah.
A lot of people have started talking about working in football.
Mm-hmm.
Younger kids are now thinking of it as a career path, which is
Mm-hmm.
definitely shows their passion for the sport, right?
Yeah.
Even athletes are now, even if you've noticed, there are athletes who are from privileged backgrounds who've taken it up as a career path.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
hadn't
Yeah.
seen that before. I mean, maybe
Uh,
one or two athletes, but now more and more athletes are coming up who are from privileged backgrounds who are taking it up as a career,
yeah.
and they want to
And
represent the country.
it's also not everybody's thinking about the conventional sports. Not everybody's thinking about I want to be a footballer, I want to be a cricketer, because of obviously the internet and things reaching people a lot easier. There are athletes who are I'm missing on the guy's name, but he goes and competes in Ironmans, and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
I'll put it up on the screen.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
can't recall his name. Yeah,
yeah, so yeah, there's that, and then there are these I think four kids who are doing freestyling.
yeah. These
Magnus K,
kids,
yeah.
bilkul. So these guys were freestylers. They took it up a couple of years ago, and they're really making waves within Pakistan.
And they're really
And I think
good.
they're really good. And Red
Yeah.
Bull just did an article on them as well.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
you have these kids who are we have mountaineers. We have
Yeah.
more mountaineers now than before. We have more cyclists than before.
Mm-hmm.
I
We
mean, it
also have
starts off as a,
yeah, we
yeah,
also have like rallies. We have a lot of rallies which are supported by the government in interior Sindh and all.
exactly. So
Yeah.
we do have a lot of positive things happening. It's just that they're not being highlighted enough.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So I think that's probably the only issue with this. But overall, I think there's a lot of people who are taking it up, even as a maybe even as a hobby,
Mm-hmm.
which is a positive because eventually over time this hobby is going to turn into a career. Not maybe not for that person particularly, but maybe for the kids in the next 10, 12 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there has been a change. Like even the person who trains me,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm gonna have him on the podcast in a couple of episodes. So we're gonna talk about fitness and health.
Yeah.
When I was speaking to him, he didn't take up fitness and health and just as a I can do this. I'm good at it. He was very adamant
Hmm.
about this is what I want to do, and he was very passionate about rowing, and he thought, okay, I
Oh,
can coach people.
oh, where does he? I want to learn rowing, so maybe I should get in touch with him.
uh, yeah, sure. I'll send you his info.
Yeah,
But
that'd be cool.
yeah, shout out Asim Iqbal. Yeah, so
Awesome.
yeah. I mean, rowing is a pretty big thing over here.
Hmm.
At least when I was in school, it was a pretty big thing, and there
Hmm.
are a lot of tournaments happening, and these kids go to an international level, and they do compete, which is another
Hmm.
example of a
Yeah.
sport which is not being highlighted. And I know we said that we would talk about something positive, but वही dip आ जाता है end में.
Positive. I mean, it is a positive that they're going, right?
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to nobody going anywhere. So
Uh,
that's good. And here's another positive. I was talking to this guy who works in football, and well, it ends in a negative. But the positive is that
Let's
that
start
up
off with the
until
negative.
it won't make sense if I say it that
Okay,
way.
okay, that
So
makes
these
sense.
kids, these kids who are competing for Pakistan at a younger age
Mm-hmm.
in football, they're doing really well.
Uh-huh.
They can beat their opponents very easily
Mm-hmm.
international competitions may.
Like we're
But
talking
after the
under
age
14, under
under
15s.
14, yeah.
Okay.
So when they reach the age of 16 and 17, that's when there comes the slump comes.
Uh-huh.
It's because again the training and all of that. But at least till 15, they're beating everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Okay, so one thing which I want you to do is I
Yeah.
want you to whoever's going to listen to this podcast, and if they make it to this point, I want
Yeah.
5 athletes which people should maybe look into, maybe follow their social
Okay.
media profiles or check an article out about them, or
Right.
just to follow up. Just let's spread a little. Let's take more names. I think we've taken
Yeah.
Sadia
Yeah.
Abbas's name a
Okay.
lot of
Apart
times.
from Saadi Abbas, apart
Huh.
from him, go check him out as well.
Yeah.
So we have SN Ayaz.
Hmm.
We have Sarah Mehboob Khan.
Okay.
She's a tennis player.
All right.
Then there is Tala Talib,
Mm-hmm.
Nu Bhatt,
What does these
and
two are weightlifters?
these two are weightlifters. Sarah is a
Mm-hmm.
tennis player, SN is a squash player,
Mm-hmm.
and Josefa Ibrahim.
Oh,
Everybody
Josefa is
needs to read
amazing.
about
Yeah,
Josefa. He's a
Josefa is a
superstar.
star. Yeah, I think Josefa was the first couple of. He was in the first wave of people Magnus signed,
Yeah, yeah, and
and
that kid is
yeah,
amazing.
like I remember one who telling me about him, and I was like, really? Like, does this actually happen? And even if you look at his still, where he's
Yeah.
oh the guy rock star.
So that kid, here's a positive. He started playing and he's been winning almost every single match that he's played, every
Mm-hmm.
single tournament he's played. I think he's won the Japan tournament 4 times. He's recently won the US Junior Open as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got like I think over 31 titles to his name, and he's only 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah,
that's
I
a
mean, we
positive.
yeah, we did have athletes like that, right? Like, man, I keep forgetting his name. Jahangir Khan?
Jahangir Khan, Jansher Khan, yeah.
Yeah, 555 consecutive wins.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
think this kid is possibly going to be.
is
Let's
potential.
hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
hope so.
definitely. So I think I
Chalo.
named five, right? And not all of them are signed by our company, by
Mm-hmm,
Magnus.
mm-hmm,
They're different. I just wanted to just throw out their names because they definitely deserve the recognition.
Yeah, I'll edit it and put some sort of graphic there
Yeah.
as well. But awesome. I think should we wrap it up?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sorry I've been ranting a lot about a lot of things,
It's
but
okay. It's okay.
there's obviously a lot of positive here as well.
Yeah, I mean that's my entire point of doing this, right? It's to,
Yeah,
even if it's a rant, at least the information needs to get out there. That,
yeah,
even if two other people who are interested in it take it up and follow up,
yeah,
still
yeah,
it's still a lot.
yeah. That definitely.
Yeah, maybe they know somebody in the hockey federation and they'll call them up and be like, what's going on, or
Yeah, I let's
something.
hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, anyways, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It was a lot of fun, and I remember putting a stop to us talking about sports last week, because
Yeah.
you're like, nahi, nahi, we'll exhaust everything. अभी यही रुक जाते
Yeah,
हैं.
yeah.
Anyways,
It was great to be here. I absolutely enjoyed having a conversation. We don't quite get to have these kind of conversations often here, so
yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
All right. So for those people who don't know, you have your own podcast. So
I do.
let's plug that in a little
Okay,
bit, talk about that, and then
sure.
we'll end it.
Sure. So last year, I started a podcast and I decided to talk to people who work behind the scenes in sports.
Mm-hmm.
I, in the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to talk to athletes, but I've never had the opportunity to learn and speak to people from outside of Pakistan as well as from within
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pakistan who are working behind the scenes. So the idea behind this was basically to talk to people, right? In the past couple of months, I've learned a lot of myself, especially speaking to some people in football.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to this guy by the name of Curtis Marshall. He's Canadian, and he
Mm-hmm.
talks about the Canadian Premier League, the football league.
Okay. Okay.
So it was really it's a very insightful conversation. So that's why I started what it's called What's the Brew,
Mm-hmm.
and
I'll link
that's
it
why I
below.
started it. Yeah, awesome. So
Awesome. Cool.
that's why I started it. It's basically what's brewing in sports, in
Uh-huh.
the world of sports. Even though these people are working behind the scenes, they obviously have a very good understanding of how and what's going on in sports around the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so if so people are basically gonna be expecting when they come onto your podcast just uh behind the scenes stuff, right?
yeah,
Like.
behind the scenes stuff about the leagues. Recently, I did an interview with somebody who was basically offering internships to
Mm-hmm.
people. He said if anybody wants to work in football, they can get in touch with me.
Oh, that's pretty
He's
cool.
based in Pakistan.
That's
So
cool. That's
yeah,
awesome.
so yeah,
Chalo, I think we're done.
yeah,
I'll
awesome.
have you. I'll have you on again once COVID ends and you are in Karachi. We'll do an
For
in-person
sure.
sort of thing. Maybe we'll touch on some of the positives and some of the
Oh yeah,
changes
yeah,
from this time to the next time we speak.
yeah. Let's hope so.
Right.
But yeah, looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to the next conversation as well.